This is once again the Boxing Freaks. Iman and Darjan bringing you another show to discuss this past weekend's boxing events. We had three very exciting matchups, two on Showtime and one on ESPN. So today we're going to focus on the bouts between Regis Prograis versus Julius Indongo, and that was for the vacant 140-pound interim WBC title. We also had Sergey Lipinets versus Mikey Garcia for Lipinets' 140-pound IBF title. And we had Scott Quigg and Oscar Valdez for Valdez's WBO featherweight title. And we'll have a little more on that later since Quigg actually did not make weight. So originally, Prograis was supposed to fight Victor Postel for the vacant title, but Postel actually had a thumb injury, and the fight was called off right around February 12th, right around mid-February, and Indongo actually took the fight on with 4 weeks left basically for the fight to happen, and that's how this fight came about.
And I actually thought that I was disappointed that Postal got injured because I actually thought that would be a better fight and a better challenge.
I did as well.
For Prograis, and I also thought that it'd be more of a 50-50 fight, more of a pick'em fight. And he has championship experience. Obviously, Indongo does as well, but he kind of fell into that title. I mean, he was fortunate to take on Edward Troyanovsky, who was considered a weak titleist at that time. And not to take anything away from Indongo, I love his background story. And he's hungry. Obviously, he's been a hungry guy, and plus he's already, in his mid-30s, so he definitely didn't show up for a paycheck. He wanted his title back, or he wanted a title back. So I was a little bit disappointed, but I did think Indongo's awkward style could pose a challenge for Prograis because he hasn't fought a fighter who's fought somebody that, like, for example, Indongo fought when he fought Terrence Crawford, so he hasn't fought somebody who's...
Go ahead.
No, he hasn't fought somebody who's fought an opponent as good as Crawford, for example, with Indongo. And plus, not only that, Indongo, he has experience. I mean, he won his title in Russia in a hostile environment with a knockout, with a one-punch knockout. So that was impressive. So he's been kind of a road warrior. Obviously, he's not fighting in his home country, So he's traveled. He's been in Europe. He's fought in America. So I did still think that it was going to be difficult for Prograis initially because he presents with an awkward style. He's kind of got these long, loopy arms, and the one thing though that the reason why I thought Postal would have been a better fight because he's more technically sound than Indongo. One of the problems with Indongo is that it's almost he's too long almost to a fault because he can't fight on the inside, and every time Prograis got inside him, he just kind of, he threw punches. He landed with some punches, but they're just arm punches. His arms are so long, he can't really set his feet. He's not able to fight on the inside without having that range. And I just don't know he's a smart enough boxer to be able to measure distance and establish the range that he needs, especially, obviously, against a young, hungry fighter. Well, not so young. I mean, he's 28, 29, but, relatively young boxing-wise. Fighter like Prograis.
Well, it's interesting how we got here, actually. The world of boxing is very small. So Prograis ends up fighting Indongo and knocking him out in 2, which Terrence Crawford did it in 3. Indongo has now lost his last 2 fights, both by knockout. And it's interesting to note that we had a fully southpaw fight. We actually don't get those a lot.
Right.
We had an interesting one earlier on in Lomachenko's career against Gary Russell Jr. Both of them southpaws. They fought each other. We saw Indongo fight Crawford, both southpaws, although Crawford can fight both ways. And then we saw this one. So it was a rare treat we got to see that just as a side. But in terms of how we got here, it's interesting because Sergey Lipinets, who just fought Garcia, he actually was he was the mandatory challenger to fight Indongo before Indongo got an exception from the IBF to try to unify all the major titles against Crawford. And then Crawford goes and knocks him out. And then Crawford vacates the titles by going to 147. So what we actually ended up having this past weekend was an issue where we have the WBC interim title being fought for because Crawford vacated the title. Okay, and then we had Lipinets fighting Garcia, and we still have two vacant titles out there right now. So Terrence Crawford, just by existing in that division, caused a ton of chaos, the ripples of which partially occurred this past weekend, and are still going to have an effect on the division until we've got all the major belts being held by somebody, and then until we have a unified fighter. And for Indongo's part, I think that he actually might be done. He suffered two. I won't say the knockout against Crawford was bad, but this one against Prograis was a little worse in my opinion. He just didn't seem to have his footing in there, and I'm concerned that he really can't fight tip-top talent. The elite talent, I don't think he can handle. And he's gonna mess around and become just a name and a journeyman here pretty soon. I think he's on a fast track to retirement. I would give him maybe 3 more fights. If he doesn't win his next 3 fights against good guys, I think he's done. I don't really know how he can come back from this right now. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to write off a guy for suffering 2 losses, because losses aren't the end of the world, and typically, depending on where a guy is in his career and what's happened prior to that point, a loss can, a lot of times makes him better. Look at Lomachenko, right? Completely different situation, though. Lomachenko had no business taking the fight against Alito so early. He did it anyway. Whereas Indongo, he's like I said, he's 34, he's 35, and I agree with what you're saying. Even though typically when a guy gets a loss or 2, I'm not so quick to write them off, depending on the circumstance. With Indongo in particular, the problem is this: not only did he lose those 2 fights, against 2 champions. In my opinion, like you said, I don't think he's at that world level. The problem with him is this, and it's just kind of unfortunate for him. Age isn't on his side. So he's 34, he's 35. Triple G, for example, is climbing up there in age, but obviously their career arcs are completely different. He's still undefeated. He's able to get the big fights. Ndongo's not going to get another big fight. And if he does get a big fight, it's going to be a showcase fight. I think at this point in his career, basically what's probably going to end up happening with Indongo is I think he'll get a couple more, like I said, I think he'll get 3 more fights, quote unquote, big fights. Big in the sense that I think he's going to face a name opponent, but I don't think anybody's really, the matchmakers or, the pundits watching the fight, I don't think anybody's really going to expect Indongo to be anything other than really a stepping stone to measure where that fighter is at. And I think, for example, in probably his next fight or 2, if he continues to fight, obviously, I'm not saying he's retiring or anything, but I think in his next fight or 2, as opposed to fighting a guy like Prograis, a 28, 29-year-old who's young boxing-wise, but ready to break through on that world stage, I think it's going to be more. He's going to take on. I think they're going to match him up with a prospect, somebody who's not quite ready for that world stage yet, and they're going to take a step up to Indongo and use that, to kind of measure where they're at, and depending on how they look against him, they knock him out same way. First 3 rounds. Okay, well then he matched Crawford. He matched Prograis. They're gonna give him a bigger step up. If he doesn't look so well, and Indongo is kind of outboxing him, and it's a little bit too awkward, well then that young fighter probably isn't ready yet, to deal with different type of styles that he's going to deal with as he steps up. Yeah, and
so, a couple of problems with Indongo. First, I think people are wise to him in terms of his ability. So, traditionally for normal-handed fighters, southpaws are a little awkward. Okay, he is rangy. He's tall. He's got some reach. I don't really like his footwork all that much, but he's active.
His awkwardness kind of goes beyond the fact that he's a southpaw, and this is why I thought it might kind of present a slightly smaller challenge than Postal, but I thought it still presented a challenge for Prograis because his awkwardness doesn't go. It's not so simple as, oh, he's just a southpaw. This is going to be naturally tough to deal with. You know, he's really got a herky jerky kind of style. He's kind of, you know, he's kind of all over the place. He looks unsure of himself sometimes.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the chin for that herky jerky kind of style. So that was going to lead to my second point. You know, he ends up in these weird positions in the ring, but he can't take a punch. A lot of people, for some reason, I don't know why, and including, I remember you mentioned this, that you had Indongo winning that first round. I didn't, because I saw 3 times, 2 for sure, that Prograis hurt Indongo, and both of them were straight punches. One was with a jab that just halted him in his tracks and actually made his knees buckle a little bit. And,
well, you know, the jab that hurt him was towards the end of the round. And you know what? I mean, you know.
No, it was before that. There was that one. There was one right, maybe a minute 15 or so, minute 30 into the fight, where he ate one. And Prograis landed the more effective punches in that round, which is why I gave him the round. I knew then that Indongo was not going to last. I thought he might get to maybe round 4 or 5, but the fight would be over. And he got him out of there in 2.
He did, and you know what? You're right. In the last minute 15, and going on after that, and he hit him against. I believe it was a jab. I think he got him again.
It was a jab. It was a stiff. It was a stiff.
You're right. You're right. Prograis definitely. I mean, he put the foot on the metal a little bit towards the end. I just thought at the beginning of the round, and Prograis landed the tougher punches. I thought at the beginning of the round, Indongo started off well. You're right. Maybe he didn't win the round, but he was shooting his jab. You know, he was jabbing. He landed punches. That's what I'm saying. You know, he's got these real awkward long arms. Kind of throws real looping punches. He's an arm puncher. He doesn't really dig deep, dig his feet into the ground and plant his feet. He's more of an arm puncher, but he was landing some shots and he was connecting and he was utilizing his jab. But you know what? Towards the end of that second round, I actually disagree with you. I started to see somewhat of a broken man. Not that his spirit was broken, not that he took severe punishment. I just felt like in his eyes he looked like he probably didn't belong right here in this ring at the end of the first round. And I felt it coming in the second or third round. In the second round, I mean, Prograis, he throws a good jab. And I know you've got some criticisms about him yourself, but he throws a good jab. He's got power in both hands. And one thing I did like about him, he seems very self-aware, right? He seems very self-aware. Before the fight, he was getting interviewed, and he was telling the Showtime, announcer, he was saying, well, you know what? People who watch my fights, first they say that I'm just a knockout artist, you know? I can't box. Then they say I'm just a boxer. I don't have power. You know, so he kind of went into this little speech about how he wanted to show different things. He wanted to show his ring IQ. He wanted to show that he's got power. He wanted to show that he's got a jab. He wanted to show that he can mix it up. And I thought he did that. See, I thought he did that. I thought maybe Indongo wasn't the perfect opponent to show the complete bag of tricks because, you know, it ended up being such an easy fight. But I thought he did a good job of kind of mixing it up with everything that he said he would. He wasn't really rushing straight forward towards Indongo. You know, he was picking his spots nicely in the first round, even when he ate the jab, and even when he took a couple of those weak arm punches. He didn't rush in. You know, he's definitely not a straight line fighter. He was utilizing some angles, but obviously, you know.
Well, yeah, I don't think we learned anything new about Regis Prograis here. I think we know he's a warrior. I think we know he can fight. Question is, can he fight against the top competition? If Terrence Crawford was still in the division, could he beat him? No, I don't think so. Can he beat Mikey Garcia? That's a question. That's a question that we need to have answered.
Yeah, but you know what? I don't think it's fair to ask, can he beat Terrence Crawford? Most people right now, and probably for a while, if ever, there's probably only a select few that people would even choose to have a chance against Crawford, but most people aren't going to have a chance against Terrence Crawford, especially at 140.
But can you put up a fight though? I mean, let's say you don't win, but can you put up a fight? When we saw Gary Russell Jr. fight Lomachenko, for the most part, up and maybe into the later rounds, it was a pretty good fight. You know, we didn't learn that Gary Russell Jr. wasn't up to the challenge. He was just outclassed. Okay, so when I look at Indongo, we have a problem in boxing where we look at we look at an opponent, we look at a boxer, and we say, okay, this wasn't characteristic of how they actually are. But Indongo has been knocked out twice in the last 2 fights. Was he really, for real, good competition for Prograis? I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna have to say no. He is who he is at this point. He isn't who we thought he was. He is who he is at this point. He didn't put up a good fight whatsoever against Crawford. He didn't put up a good fight against Prograis. So right now we haven't had anything new answered about Prograis. Not that Prograis is not a good champion. I mean, he's like 21-0 with like 18 knockouts. I mean, the guy can hit. He's in there fighting, okay? But we haven't learned what he can really do against elite level competition, and we won't learn that until he fights any of the current world champions at lightweight, at light welterweight. And right now, that's Mikey Garcia, having just won the IBF, is also now the lineal champion at light welterweight. He's probably going to end up forfeiting his WBC belt at lightweight, and so now you've got the WBO and the ring title are both vacant. So they're going to want to fight for those. But that just leaves a few of those guys. I mean, of course, you've got your contenders but those are probably your top 2 guys right now at light welterweight right now, Garcia and Prograis. I don't see any reason to delay that fight from happening at all.
Well, you know what? I disagree with that, and we'll get into a bit more of it later. I disagree with a couple of those things. First of all, I don't think that fight's going to happen. I think Mike Garcia, just based on his own account, I think he has bigger fish to fry. No disrespect to Prograis, but I just think that Mikey Garcia, he's already a pound for pound fighter. He constantly wants the big fights. He's looking for the big fights. So I just read the other day, his most recent interview. He wants to move up to 147. So he wants to win another championship. He wants to win a championship at 147. I don't think that fight's going to happen. I disagree with one of the things that you said, and we'll kind of talk about this later when we analyze the Garcia-Lipinets fight. I think Lipinets. I disagree with. I think Lipinets is the guy other than Mikey Garcia who can probably take out everybody currently at 140. And he gave a good account of himself in that fight, which we'll talk about. But I believe he's the most complete fighter that there is. Right there, actively at the 140-pound landscape, and
let's talk about that right now.
Okay, yeah. All right. Well, we'll jump straight into that. Let's talk about Garcia-Lipinets. So that fight, obviously, IBF championship. Lipinets was the champion, but he's never, ever faced a fighter as good as Mikey Garcia, obviously. And I want to know, going into that fight, I actually thought I was calling the big upset, the huge upset. I was wrong, but I thought Lipinets was going to do enough to take it, because I think he's a special fighter. I think he's going to be a special fighter, as I said before. I actually thought he would do enough to take it. I didn't think he'd knock Mikey Garcia out. I thought he would be able to make it 12 rounds and have it be that type of split decision type of fight where it can go either way. And that obviously didn't happen, but he gave a good account of himself. And I want to know real quick before I give my thoughts on that fight and how I feel that fight went. I want to know how you feel about that fight in particular, and how you feel about Mikey Garcia compared to somebody like Terence Crawford or Lomachenko.
So, well, first of all, I think I scored that fight probably in Garcia's favor by about 8, probably 10 rounds. I think I had him winning that fight by like 9 rounds. Garcia mostly dominated that fight. He landed the cleaner, more effective punches, in my opinion. He controlled the pace just a little bit more. He just generally outboxed Lipinets. That's one thing. As far as how I see him facing up against top competition, where at 140 or at 147?
Well, I mean, if he's going to fight Crawford, it's going to be at 147. If he's going to fight Lomachenko, obviously he's not going to be at 147.
So I have a couple of thoughts about that. So first of all, At 140, I think he's the cream of the crop right now at 140, unless Lomachenko moves up to 140.
I agree.
That's one thing. That's not saying Lomachenko is guaranteed to dominate at 135, but all signs point to him doing so, in my opinion. At 147, I don't think Garcia can beat Thurman. I don't think he can beat Errol Spence Jr., and I don't think that he can beat Terrence Crawford. I don't think he should move up to 147 at all. I don't think he can beat any of those guys. I just don't.
I mean, if 147 right now is murderer's row. So, I mean, you definitely, any guy moving up to 147, if you want to get to the top, you're going to have to go through hell. But as far as the Lipinets-Garcia fight itself, I kind of want to analyze a couple of the rounds where I noticed some things, kind of just give my thoughts on a couple of round-by-round opinions, and then kind of give some overall thoughts on them. First thing, the thing with Lipinets, if you haven't watched him, a lot of people think, they see his knockout record, they think he's just a knockout puncher. He is a complete 180 of that. He's definitely not just a power puncher. He's not a brawler. He's not a face-first brawler. In the Garcia fight, especially in the first couple of rounds, first two rounds, which were close rounds, I mean, let's call them competitive rounds. I thought Lipinets utilized great movement, head and footwork. He does a great job. He did a great job of slipping and ducking punches. He has a stiff jab, and that's really one of the biggest things. And when we talk about Oscar Valdez in a bit, I'm going to make a lot of references to this fight because I think he can learn and improve a lot by watching Lipinets and Garcia in particular. But he has a stiff jab. He blooded up, Mikey's nose pretty early in the fight with his jab. He's got a very, very hard jab, and he doesn't go away from it, right? He keeps utilizing it. He uses it to set up the rest of his offense. He fights off his jab and off of his footwork and movement, and he has dangerous power in both hands with various punches, but he's not in love with his power. His power supplements all the work that he does with his jab and defense, and he is a good defensive fighter, in my opinion. I think he's a boxer puncher, and I think as a fighter with the offensive skill and power that he does possess, I think he's about as good as defensively as you could possibly get without switching to a more defensive style completely. I thought the first two rounds were close and competitive. First two rounds is more of a high-stakes chess match type of fight,
Uh-huh.
And really, in the third round, I thought Lipinets did a great job of mixing it up. He was throwing hard body shots, left hooks, overhand rights. He has a full arsenal of punches at his disposal. And I think just about any, like I said, I think any other fighter in the division, I think at that point in the fight, he would have probably started to outland them, and possibly dominate by the fourth round, especially with the way he was fighting in this fight. But Mikey Garcia, man, he's just so smart. He's such a complete fighter himself, and he never loses composure, and he always looks calm in there. He kept the same demeanor throughout. He never lost discipline, which is huge, and that's one of the biggest positives about him. He never loses discipline. And if you're a young fighter out there looking to maximize your potential by minimizing the amount of mistakes that you make in the ring, you need to watch Mikey Garcia, and you need to study his film because he sticks to his game plan better than most fighters in the sport. He just doesn't make many mistakes, and he's absolute. In my opinion, he's an absolute master. One of the things that a lot of people don't give him credit for, he's a master at measuring distance and keeping himself in the range that he needs to be in to stay as effective as possible. He's also very quick to adjust an opponent, and that obviously separates great fighters from fighters who fall short. And you saw him make some adjustments in the Lipinets fight. With the way he's able to fight forward and backwards, he always looks like he's in control of a fight. He always looks like he's dominating the action. In this fight, however, we have slightly different opinions. I thought Lipinets has, I think Lipinets has a very similar ability to do the same thing. And for the first time in a long time during the Mikey Garcia fight, there were quite a few pick-em moments, where it was a kind of a toss-up deciding who was truly controlling the action. More times than not, it was Garcia, obviously. Nobody's disputing that. But I don't think neither guy completely dominated action for extended periods of time.
So essentially, you mentioned round 3. So I thought by round 2, Garcia had already established himself with his distance. He was landing the more effective blows. He's backing Lipinets up. I mean, in round 3, you mentioned the left hook. In round 3, Lipinets landed a very good left hook in the first minute of the round. He bloodied Mikey's nose with that left hook, actually. He looked a little more relaxed. Mikey had some good flurries in that round, but Lipinets had just had the best punch of the round and more consistent work. That was one of the 3 rounds I gave Lipinets.
I thought through the early rounds, like I said, it was more of a chess match, and more times than not, every time a guy made a move, the other one countered him with a move that that had to make the other guy think. It wasn't a brainless fight. It was a very entertaining fight to watch if you're a true boxing fan. And I noticed, not counting any particular round, just kind of throughout the fight, let's say before the knockdown, there were a lot of times where Lipinets beat Garcia to the punch, and successfully countered Garcia. But the thing is, Garcia never really allowed Lipinets to get in a sustained rhythm, and that's why he's just so smart and he's just so good. Not that Lipinets looked out of place or he never got sloppy. He stayed disciplined himself. He was fluid and smooth throughout. He's a very fluid fighter. He actually reminds me of Dimitri Pirog, who a lot of fans might have forgotten about. He knocked out Danny Jacobs, gave Danny Jacobs his first loss way back when. He reminds me a lot of Dimitri Pirog. Maybe not quite as good defensively and shifty and crafty with his movements, but he really kind of reminds me of him. He was fluid and smooth throughout, but more often than not, when he would land a stiff jab, body shot, or counter punch, Garcia didn't allow him to follow up those shots with combinations. And to me, that was the X factor in this fight, was that Lipinets' combinations were neutralized, right? He threw a variety of punches. He threw a lot of different types of punches, and he presented them with different angles. And when he did get inside, his upper body movement helped him evade a lot of the power punches that were being thrown by Mikey. But every time he had success landing single punches, jabs, or power punches, Garcia did a great job of staying composed, eating the punch, and staying disciplined to not engage in a firefight, but to use his feet to create separation. And then from there, he constantly followed up with very quickly with his own work, So, and even Robert Garcia said it once in the corner, hey, you don't want to stay on the ropes. Don't let the judges think that, he's successfully cutting off the ring. And he didn't allow that to happen too many times. Every time where Lipinets will come with a different punch, he really neutralized Lipinets' ability to follow up with combinations. That's the one thing that Lipinets lacked. He didn't throw or land a lot of combinations. I'm talking 3, 4, 5 punches in a row. That's what we didn't see too much.
Well, what Mikey did well, especially I think by round 4, he had established that overhand right. He was throwing that jab and then shifting to the right and coming overhand as Lipinets ducked low right across that left temple. So he did that, and then by round 5 he started landing a lead left hook. So at that point, he started to land those punches, and he established himself from the standpoint of the harder puncher. And by round 7, he landed that beautiful inside counter left hook that put Lipinets down on his ass, I think for the first time ever. I don't think he'd been knocked down.
He's never been knocked out, and it was a flash knockdown. He wasn't hurt.
But he caught him coming forward though. Lipinets came forward and he went right to the canvas.
And you know what? Let me say this. First of all, like I said, I think both guys are complete fighters. This fight proved to be too big a step up for Lipinets, and that's okay. A loss is okay. I think this loss is going to make him better. Because really, in this fight, in my opinion, before the knockdown, he was starting to turn the tide a little bit, right? He was landing hard punches. That overhand right there.
We'll agree to disagree. we'll just agree to disagree on that one.
Before the knockdown, he landed a really hard overhand right? He ran a really hard overhand right, and he was starting to kind of turn the momentum.
I mean, before the knockdown, I had him only winning 1 round. I think that I don't remember who was ringside announcing, but their ringside score for Showtime, I had him winning. I had Lipinets winning round 3. He had him winning round 4. Otherwise, our score to that point was the same. In fact, the scorecard I had was similar to 2 of the judges, and yours was similar to 1 of the judges, but it was still a wash. You had Garcia 116. I had Garcia 117. It was a wash no matter what it was. So
I had Garcia winning the first 2 rounds, which were close rounds, but I thought he did enough to win. But I had Lipinets up in the third and fourth round. I thought he did a lot better. And ignoring the fifth and sixth rounds, right? In the seventh round, Lipinets was starting to, I thought he was starting to turn the tide a little bit before the knockdown. I thought he was starting to launch his best offense of the fight at that point, but he made a mistake, and Mikey obviously capitalized, and that made the huge difference in the fight. Not that Lipinets was necessarily winning at that point yet, but he got caught with a counter left that knocked him down. But right before that, he was landing some hard punches. In particular, he landed a huge overhand right, which Garcia wasn't actually hurt by. But I think Lipinets thought he got him hurt. Lipinets got overexcited and over-aggressive after that, and obviously he got countered, which is more of like an off-balance type of shot. I don't think he was hurt by that. But before that, I thought Lipinets, when he threw that overhand right, I thought he had him hurt. I thought he thought that he had Garcia hurt, and he got overexcited, over-aggressive after that. And I think what he should have done instead was disengage a bit, because he wasn't really cutting off the ring successfully. And when he ate that counter left, Garcia wasn't really hurt. So I think that, like I said, Lipinets thought he kind of hurt Garcia with the overhand right. He kind of more like rushed in and was kind of eager for the kill. But once again, Garcia stayed composed, and he measured him perfectly with a beautifully timed counter left hand. I just feel if Lipinets could have disengaged a bit there and applied the same smart pressure he was applying up until that point, what led to that overhand right before the knockdown. I think the round could have been his round. The round could have went differently, and the fight possibly could have went a little bit differently, because that was a crippling loss of a point. But with that said, you have to attribute that to a huge discrepancy in experience. Lipinets has never fought a guy remotely as good as Garcia, or with the ring IQ that Garcia has, and that's what he has. This guy is just so smart in there. I don't think Mikey Garcia is as special physically as physically gifted as a fighter like Crawford or Lomachenko. But I think he makes up for that with ring savvy, with ring IQ, which are absolutely elite. Not only is the experience, but he's a jack of all trades type of fighter, but not one where everything's kind of just average.
Well, here's the thing. There's a problem with guys who aren't pure boxers at this weight not being successful. If you're not a good boxer puncher, or you don't have the power, you're gonna have a problem. So Lipinets, he's 13-1 with 10 KOs, but he hasn't knocked out any of the top guys. Okay, he won the vacant IBF title. After an IBF eliminator, it's not like he beat a champion already.
Right,
so,
that's why I said.
So I don't think he's got the power to bother the top guys. I just don't. He's very much a guy who likes to stand in there and throw shots. You need to be able to truly box at this weight class, okay? One shot most of the time is not going to change the tide of the fight. Okay? Most of these guys are not, one-punch knockout artists. Most of them aren't. So...
Right. Well, see, and this is where we're going to have to agree.
Not on average. Like, you have fights that end early, round 1, round 2, round 3. But, on average, if you were to take the average round time of all these guys' fights, somewhere the fight might end. If they have 10, 12 KOs and they've got 13, 14 wins, somewhere the fight ended at somewhere between rounds 5 and 8. And that's from punches and bunches. That's from a guy... taking punishment, okay? Not from getting hit once and going down and that being it. So these guys are not like one-punch KO artists for the most part. And I don't see him having the power to bother his opponents like that in the future. I just don't. Especially somebody, I don't see him bothering somebody like Prograis, with his power at all.
And see, you know what, and that's where we're gonna have to disagree. And I understand your opinion. And I see what you're saying. You know, about the lack of knockouts against an elite fighter. But you know, nobody's knocked out Mikey Garcia. So you know, let's just put that out there, right? But the thing with Lipinets is, and this is why I disagree. See, I think he has potential as a two-way fighter. I don't think he's this, you know, and we'll talk about this with Valdez. You know, I don't think he's this pressure fighter without the power, you know, to truly be elite. I disagree with that, and this is why I compared him to Dimitri Purok. I like his movement. He has good movement. He's very fluid. He uses his upper body. He moves his head. You know, he's not a Lomachenko with his feet, but he's not a straight line fighter, right? He's not Scott Quigg. So he moves his body well. He utilizes movement, and he fights off of his jab. You know, that's his main weapon to set up his, you know, double-handed power punches is his jab. He's very technically sound, but he doesn't have that typical lack of defensive movement that most pressure fighters do. That's why, in my opinion, I guess time will tell, you know, and we're going to see who's right. I think he will end up being a successful elite boxer puncher because I think he has the ability to be that type of fighter. And you know, as far as Mikey, you know, everything about the way he fights is just so calculated and smart. You know, it's really beautiful to watch. As I said, I don't think he's naturally as gifted, especially as Lomachenko. But in this fight in particular, like I said, the X factor, what I think was that Garcia neutralized Lipinets from throwing combinations. And that's why you couldn't really see his power as much. Lipinets, if you look at his last few fights, he got decisions, but he outboxed. He showed skill and technical ability, right? So I just think that it was more on Mikey. I mean, it was a huge step up, but it's more that Mikey just neutralized his ability to throw combinations, right? So when you have a pressure fighter, whether they're able to fight, whether they're a boxer, puncher, you know, or they're just a straight up pressure fighter who cuts the ring off and only knows one thing and no defensive movement or anything, when you have a fighter like that, they're not going to be successful if they're not able to throw combinations, right? So I don't think that Lipinets is a one shot at a time inactive type of fighter. I just think Mikey Garcia had a perfect game plan. I think he neutralized him. I think this is big. Time will tell who's right on this. Time will tell how his career ends up going. But I'm definitely going to watch the next Lipinets fight. I definitely, in my opinion, think he's still one of the top dogs at 140. Aside from Mikey Garcia, I think he can beat everybody right now at 140. And we'll see what happens. You know, we agree to disagree on that.
I'm not writing him off at all. I hope that he can learn from this and go back to camp and, you know, take a little time, go back to camp and improve. But I think he needs to improve his fundamental boxing is all I'm saying. I don't think he should get in there. I don't think he should get in there and bang at all.
And that's fair. And that's fair enough. And I just think that with, you know, obviously, I mean, and you know, and they even said, I can't remember who it was. He was supposed to fight somebody else. He could have taken an easier title defense. And before the Showtime showcase, they said, you know, that he said, I want to fight Mikey Garcia. I want the big fight. I want to prove myself on the world level. So he didn't have to take this fight. You know, 13 fights in his career. He really didn't have to take this fight.
No, he gave Mikey a tough fight. He acquitted himself well. He didn't do it well enough to win most of the rounds. Mikey definitely was more assertive, landed the more effective punches, controlled the pace better, was able to make Lipinets feel his power. And so I from that standpoint, you know, Mikey definitely came out the winner for reasons. But Lipinets acquitted himself well. He definitely stood in there. He took the shots. He did go down once, but I mean he got caught with a counter left coming forward. So if he just has to go back to the drawing board, it is what it is. You know, there are definitely other fights to be made out there. He's still a top 5 guy in that division right now. So I don't see him going anywhere. Unlike an Indongo, for example, I don't see him going anywhere right now.
Right, and I guess, you know, just to wrap up kind of this talk as far as Lipinets at least, I guess, you know, what it comes down to is I agree with your assessment. I agree with what you said. He has to go back and work a little bit more on his boxing fundamentals. The reason why I say that is because he has the skill and talent to do it. he's able to do it. You know, he's not a face-first brawler, and I wouldn't classify him as a pressure fighter. I think he can be kind of a complete fighter that Mikey Garcia is. He didn't really show it so much in this fight. He did with his defense at times, but he didn't show the power or the combinations that he needed to truly capitalize on a performance that would have displayed, a complete skill set. So, and I got to attribute that to Mike Garcia. He neutralized him. He was able to make the adjustment. And once again, for me, he did not let, even though Lipinets he was first to the punch at times, and he threw a couple counter shots. You know, he's got skill, but he was never able to sustain a rhythm enough to where he was able to land combinations. And against Mikey Garcia especially, that's not enough. You know, you're either going to have to outbox him cleanly or you're going to have to hurt the guy. You know, and he was kind of stuck in limbo. He was kind of in the middle, you know. So, with that said, we had one more fight. Oscar Valdez defending his featherweight title against Scott Quigg.
Well, first of all, that was a hell of a fight. That's an early fight of the year candidate for me.
And I didn't expect it. I didn't
at
see
all.
that coming.
I was pleasantly surprised because I just put it on, like I had recorded it. I didn't see it live. And then on, I think, early yesterday, no, wait, maybe Monday, it was Monday, I was watching the fight, and I was like, whoa. I said, this is a good fight. I was shocked because you know how I feel about getting more into the lower weights. Like, once we get to featherweight and down, I start to get concerned. But they were really in there hitting each other with some doors. And, you know, unfortunately for Quigg, he came in like 3 pounds, just under 3 pounds over on his weight, so he actually couldn't fight for the title. So it was basically just a fight, and it was a war of attrition. Valdez, even if he lost, wasn't going to lose his belt, but he was not trying to lose, period. And they really went in there and went after each other. I was very surprised at that.
Yeah, it was a hell of a fight. Definitely, I mean, fight of the year type of fight. I mean, Oscar Valdez, you got to give credit to his heart and his chin. I mean, Scott Quigg doesn't have elite power, but he was taking some shots, man. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, we're going to talk about it in a little bit. He's got his jaw wired shut. I'm not sure what happened to his nose, but his nose looked a bit disfigured. So he was taking punches. He was taking bombs. But now, with that said, when we're going to analyze the fight in a bit, you know, I was a little disappointed because I don't think he had to do that, right?
Quigg is a really tough guy. So before he started boxing, he started training in Muay Thai boxing, and he was a tough guy. So he's got like 38 professional fights. He's won 34 of them. He's got 25 by KO. So he's not a weak puncher by any means. On top of that, he's just a tough dude. I don't know what you know about Muay Thai boxing training, but it's pretty brutal on your limbs. The guy can take punishment and he can dish out punishment. And for Valdez to go in there and take all that he took, get his jaw broken, to have to get wired shut after the fact, and stand in there and take those shots, that tells me a whole lot about that guy.
Oh yeah, 100%. And you know, and we'll talk about that. But you know, I'll tell you what I saw, and I'll tell you what I think he can improve on. Really, it just comes down to he just has so much more room for improvement, and I think he needs to change his identity as a fighter.
You mean Valdez?
Valdez, yeah.
Yeah, he can't keep doing that. He can't keep doing that. No, that's not.
No, I think he needs to. But here's the thing, and we'll talk about it. But I think he needs to change his identity as a fighter, and I think he can because he has the right skill set to do so. And we'll talk about it. But first, you know, I kind of want to go through some of the rounds, just early rounds. You know, in the first round, Valdez, you know, he showed his fast hands. That's one of his biggest things. He's got fast hands, lightning fast hands. He's got a good punch repertoire. He throws hard punches, and he's willing to mix it up and punish your body, right? So first round, I mean, you know, he was showing that. Second round, you know, he kept looking to punish Quigg's body. Quigg never gave up. He never stopped his forward momentum. I mean, he only knows, you know, that's all he knows. He keeps coming forward, you know, but he was eating a lot of leather. In the first two rounds, I thought Valdez was in a great rhythm. His punch output was fluid and it was smart. And even when he wasn't landing flush, you know, he was touching Quigg the whole time. I mean, he was hitting him through his guard, hitting him on the shoulders. His punches had snap. He was first to the punch. He beat Quigg to the punch every time throughout these first, let's say, two rounds. It was very sharp. In the third round, I thought Quigg, and this, once again, this is what separates good fighters from fighters who don't make it to the level that Quigg has, because he was on a world title level. Quigg did, in the third round, Quigg did a better job of not making himself such a stationary target. Which is what he was in the first two rounds. Essentially he was a punching bag the first two rounds, but he came back with some fine offense of his own, body shots, a couple of counter punches. In the third round, I thought, I can't quite remember how I scored it, but I thought Quigg won the third round. I think I had a 2-1 Valdez at that point. In fourth round, Quigg was getting into a better rhythm himself. He threw a couple counter rights, good lead right, while Valdez was against the ropes. Quigg was doing a better job of cutting the ring off, right? And one of the biggest, as far as Valdez, one of the biggest positives, which probably separated himself in the judges' eyes, is that through 4 rounds at least, he didn't take many minutes off. A lot of times you'll see guys, especially against the inferior opponent, they take too much minutes of inactivity. For example, even let's say Lomachenko against Gary Russell. He was already completely dominating the fight at that point. But we saw that fight towards the end of the fight. He was kind of just moving in there, wasn't throwing any punches. It didn't matter. It didn't sway the judges because he already had it in the bag. But I think Valdez, for the better or the worse, which once again we'll get into, he didn't take many minutes off. He didn't allow the judges to see him in the corner having the ring cut off and eating punches so much throughout the first 4 rounds. He came back every time Quigg was successful with his own offense. And for the most part, he matched him punch for punch. And nowadays, especially with young fighters, you don't see that. Especially young fighters when they have what they think is a big lead on the cards. You see far too often. You see periods of inactivity during the fight, and that's not Valdez. He's always throwing punches. Like I said, whether it's the right type, that's a whole other discussion. But regardless, in round 4, I thought Valdez was showing great defense. He can bang, but he really is a crafty fighter that can bang. He has great upper body movement when he wants to, and he does a good job of slipping punches. And through 4, Quigg he didn't have the power. He doesn't have too much power. And one of the problems with Valdez is that even though this is what I was starting to get into, and one of the problems with Valdez is that even though he's capable of good defense, he's still there to be hit far too often. He shows flashes of good defense, but he's not a complete fighter yet. I think it's going to improve as he gets more championship level experience. But he kind of fell into this title. It's not like kind of how you were talking about with Lipinets. It's not like he knocked out, climbed the rankings by knocking world-class fighters out. He just climbed the rankings how fighters climb the rankings, and he found himself with a title. So this, don't get it twisted, don't get it thinking this was his biggest fight. This was his toughest fight, and Quigg has a tough style for anybody because, the son of a gun just doesn't go, he just keeps coming.
I tell you what, I'm a little annoyed that he didn't make weight. Listen, this is your job. You have to show up at your job prepared to do your job. Part of preparing to do your job is making weight. You shouldn't be 3 pounds over. You should not be 3 pounds over. And there was some issue about them not allowing him to do his camp. For some reason, they didn't do a same-day weigh-in on him to see if he actually had made weight. They just kind of refused it for some reason. I don't know the story behind that, but I do know that happened. And I think it's ridiculous to me. Boxing has an increasing problem of not being able to make weight. If you can't make weight, you shouldn't be fighting. This is for a world title. This is your shot at this point. This is your shot at this point. Why can't you make weight? He'd only had, up until that point, I think, one other loss, a couple of draws, and one other loss. You should be trying to make weight because this is for a legitimate title. This is for a legitimate title, and you can't make weight. In my opinion, you don't even deserve to fight if you can't make weight. That's ridiculous to me. Great, you came in, you put up a great fight, and then you still lost. I was reading an article, I can't remember exactly where, to credit the author, but he did say that, justice was served regardless because Valdez still won the fight because Quigg couldn't make weight. You gotta make weight. It is what it is. You're a professional, you have to make weight. How many shots are you going to get? First of all, this is your shot. You didn't capitalize on it. It's going to affect the next time you're supposed to try to get a shot, that you want to try to get a shot. That's going to affect you. He couldn't make weight, and even still, he lost the fight. Like, why should we give him a title shot? Boxing is a business. People are putting their literal lives on the line. This is their livelihood. Why should we give this guy a shot when he's not doing what everybody else is doing to prepare for the fight? To me, that's a problem.
Right, and you know what? With that said, obviously that's not for us to decide. Whether a fight goes on or not. The fight did went on. It is what it is. The fight continued to go on, and as far as Valdez, once again, we gave him credit for winning the war of attrition. I mean, it was really this guy, he took hard shots. I mean, that was awesome to see. I mean, he is not a quitter. He's a tough ass dude, and he showed a lot, man. This guy's got a lot of grit, but he left a lot to be desired. He can fight so much smarter. And round 7, for example, is a perfect example of that, right? In the beginning of the fight, in the beginning of the round 7, the movement and the jab of Valdez, it not only neutralized the punches landed by Quigg, but it neutralized his output for a bit. Valdez had complete control of the 7th round until about 50 seconds left in the round. Once again, Valdez just planted his feet, got flat-footed, and left himself stationary on the ropes. Quigg landed 3 or 4 punch combo that just bounced off Valdez's head, and Quigg doesn't have the power to get him out of there. He didn't have the power to get him out of there, but you can't do that against a bigger puncher, a bigger, faster puncher who has just as good of a chin as Quigg. How many of those guys are out there at 126? That's a different discussion. But it's just something that I think is unnecessary. And here's really, one of the big problems. In round 8, for example, when I was analyzing round 8, to me, Valdez, he's fast enough to be first to the punch, when he counters the fighter. And every time in this fight, to me, he looked far better and fluid when he launched his offense as a supplement to his defensive maneuvering and counter punching. He's not as effective, and he's going to have a lot more tougher fights when he utilizes his defense as a reactive measure when he's already being tagged following his offensive output. In the future, he should look to be more calculated with his approach, right? Like a Mikey Garcia. Look to counter, look to pick his spots better, save his energy after proactively seeking to control the fight with his movement and jab. And, another point we'll get into later is that I thought he started to gas out. I believe it was the 11th round, So, and the 6th round is a perfect example of that. Watch how he looked in that round and all the things he did. He completely neutralized Quigg that round. He was slipping punches. He was ducking under punches, and then he watched round 8. I mean, it was a complete 180. And the thing is, when Valdez does sort of ignore his defensive movement and look to be more offensive orientated, he doesn't really cut the ring off well, right? So that's something I noticed. He's not yet elite at cutting the ring off. He's sharp with his punches, and they still come at his opponent blistering fast. But you can notice that he doesn't really do a great job of cutting the ring off yet. And I don't think he really tries to, because he hasn't needed to thus far in his career. But that's also why he's prone to taking so many punches,
Well, he can't take that kind of punishment going forward. I mean, other than his jaw being broken and having to be wired shut, he also had some dental damage from that. You could actually see it in the post-fight. He opened his mouth to kind of go, woo! And his teeth were pushed in a way that you don't want your teeth pushed in. You don't want to push in at all. So it's one thing if you're going to take that kind of punishment. First of all, you have to be on the giving end more than receiving end. But you really don't want to receive that kind of punishment because it will affect going forward greatly.
But not only that, with that said, if he does continue to fight a more pressure oriented style in the future, cutting the ring off better is one of the things he has to improve upon, right? Because when he fights like that, when he takes that punishment, when he's just reactive with his defensive maneuvering after just being straight up launching his offense first, he takes a lot of punishment and he doesn't cut the ring off well enough, to avoid some of that punishment, to get his opponent in the ropes, to be able to throw combinations and get his opponent uncomfortable, you know. So that's something he has to prove on if he's going to keep fighting that style. You know, in the 9th round, too, once again, Valdez was, you know, engaging in a dogfight, and you got to give Quigg credit. You know, it's not just, I don't think that Valdez, you know, he's not a stupid fighter. You know, I think you think he can be a smart fighter. I think he's still very inexperienced at the top level, but he's not a dumb fighter. You got to give credit to Quigg for kind of bringing the dogfight out of him. But once again, you know, Valdez was engaging in a dogfight in the 9th, and you know, and to me, it's no coincidence also that in this round he started the round off kind of just launching the flurry of punches. You know, he didn't cut the ring off. You know, he wasn't calculated. He just kind of threw like 3-4 quick punches, and that's not a coincidence because, like I said, to me, he looked a lot better in this fight when he was reactive off of Quigg's punch output and centered his offense after measuring Quigg defensively, right? So when he didn't do that, Quigg did a great job of making Valdez engage in the dogfight. And once again, you know, when Valdez was looking to seek and destroy, he didn't really cut the ring off. So it just wasn't an effective type of pressure fighting, you know? And 10th round, as far as the 10th round, you know, offensive, you know, he just doesn't have the ring savvy yet to fight a pressure style type of fight like Golovkin, you know? It's just not as effective. He doesn't cut the ring off well yet. And once again, you know, when he had a more measured approach centered around movement and reacting to Quigg's forward momentum, he ended up having a lot more success offensively.
Right.
And obviously he's able to slip a lot more punches that Quigg threw, you know? And then this leads me to kind of what I was talking about before. In round 11, another aspect, which goes kind of with all of that, is Valdez looked gassed. I thought he was tired, man. He looked absolutely gassed. And obviously, you know, he was taking the punishment to the nose and jaw as well. But, I mean, he was a sitting duck in there at times in the 11th round. He was eating a lot of hard punches. He took a left hook that almost knocked him off balance. You know, and while he doesn't really waste a lot of punches, you know, he does punch with a purpose when he does punch, you know, even given the lack of cutting off the ring when he is trying to fight a pressure style.
Yeah,
and he mixed it.
We really could. I mean, we could talk about it all day. But at the end of the day, it was a really good fight. I think, and Valdez, you know, he acquitted himself well. He did what needed to be done to win the fight. He took a lot of hard shots. He showed his chin. Going forward, I'm not sure he's going to want to do that. I think he's, you know, they're boxing at, 126, so they're at featherweight. You know, not that there's a lot of hard one-shot knockout guys again, but those guys throw a lot of shots. It's a very active weight. You know, these lower weights are very active weights. Right up until you get around 147, 154, it's a very active punching weight. And you don't want to take all those shots. You don't.
Well,
you want to get in and
you
get
know
out.
what? Exactly. And you know what? Not only that, you know, I think Valdez is a hard puncher. I don't think he has elite one-punch knockout power. I don't think he's going to translate his power into one-punch knockout power as he, you know, continues to fight better and you know, and fighters and being in big fights. So with that said, you know, as far as that 11th round and him being gassed, you know, if he just mixes his style up to utilize his biggest strengths more, that's really what it comes down to. His biggest strength to me, I don't even want to talk about the power. It's his speed and his movement. And, you know, if he fought to his strengths a bit more, he'd also conserve a lot more energy, you know, by having that measured approach. You know, and with that said, I mean, you still have to give Valdez credit because after that left hook in the 11th round, for example, that almost knocked him off balance, he came back, retaliated with his own left hook that looked like it kind of hurt Quigg. And in the 12th round, I thought, you know, to finish the fight off, I thought Valdez kind of went back more to utilizing his movement, his jab, and fighting that type of style that maximizes his strengths, you know, his speed and movement. So he made adjustments throughout the fight. You know, it's not like, you know, of course he took a beating, but you know, it's not like he just ended up, you know, brawling the entire fight. He made adjustments. You know, when he was kind of a sitting duck in there at times, he still ended up composing himself, utilizing the movement and footwork and fighting to his strengths. I just think, man, it's a dangerous proposition depending on who you're fighting. To fight, like I said, he can't take that type of punishment. I mean, he's got his jaw wide shut now. So real quick, before we finish finish off talking about this fight, I just want to know, in your opinion, with your sports injury expertise, he's got his jaw is wired shut. What exactly does that mean? What do we look at? What's the timetable? How long is the recovery? Not the recovery for the injury to when he can start training again, but how long does he need to get back to even where he can, he can start taking punches again like that?
So basically, that's a procedure done by an oral surgeon. And for this, and in this case, probably it's going to be a 5-6 week to 8 week situation. They'll reassess him. So it happened. They took him, what they said, immediately post fight to do it. I don't know exactly when it happened. It probably happened somewhere within the next 12 to 24 hours. But he got the jaw wired shut. They'll probably reevaluate him, just to follow up in a few weeks, couple weeks. In this case, since he's a professional fighter, it might even be next week, maybe the week after. Then after that, at week 4, they'll look and see, okay, what's going on. And then from there, it'll be another week or two. So probably a 6-week situation where his jaw will be wired shut. I don't know what if any dental work he'll have to have. I looked at his in the post fight. I saw his teeth looked like they were far back in his mouth, so it looked like his lower jaw. Not only was it broken, looked like it was broken in multiple places. Probably broken in more than 2 spots. So he may need dental work. I don't know. If he fights again this year, I'll be surprised. Valdez is historically a very active fighter. There's been years, like in 2013, he fought like 6 times. In 2014, he fought like 6 times. In 2015, he fought 4 times. So, and then in 16, he fought 3. So he's historically been a very active fighter. I would be surprised if he fights again this year. And if he does, it'll be in December. If he does. They'll want to make sure that he's healed very much so from that fight. I think he does need to change his style up. He doesn't want to take that kind of punishment again.
Do you think he could take a page out of Mikey Garcia's book? Do you think that's the type of fighter he should try to emulate?
Mikey still takes a ton of shots. I mean, it's not like Lipinets wasn't hitting him. He was getting hit. He just can take a punch. Classically Mexican fighters can take a punch. They're you can call it genetics. Maybe they drink a lot of milk. Could be those skulls are just thicker. I'm telling you, they can just take a punch, man. So I wouldn't take a page out of Mikey Garcia's book at all. I would start to box as much because Valdez can box. He can box. The problem is that he got into a situation where he allowed it to become a war of attrition. And Valdez, classically, as a lot of Mexican fighters, also can take a punch. He's a Mexican professional boxer, and he can take a punch. But you shouldn't let that lull you into taking punches. That's a bad idea for your long-term health. You just shouldn't do that. I mean,
right. And you know what? And the reason why I compare him to Mikey. It's because, like you said, he has the skill to box. He has the speed and the movement to box. But I don't think, I don't want to label him as a potential one-dimensional fighter, just a boxer, just a pressure fighter. When I say emulate Mikey Garcia's style, I think, not like I said, Mikey Garcia took shots, and he's not a defensive wizard. He has good, subtle defensive movements. But I think what Valdez can learn from watching him is to cater his style to become a more boxer puncher, because he has power. I don't think he has one punch knockout power at the top level, but he has enough power to where he can just mix it up, to where he can be a solid boxer puncher that's more calculated and measured in his approach, but that fights to his strengths once again. And really after this, I mean, he's kind of got no choice. I mean, like you said, Mexican fighters historically, they can take a punch, they can take a beating and keep coming back, and they'll want to fight again the next day. So he's tough, and I don't think that he's gonna have any problems with getting into wars of attrition in the future. But to maximize his chances to keep his record intact, to keep his title and to win more titles, I just think it's something that he has to do. because Scott Quigg doesn't have the power he didn't have the power to knock him out. But, you know, it's risky when you're not fighting to your strengths against a better, more powerful fighter, especially a fighter with more speed, you know?
So we have a few fights coming up, actually, this weekend on Saturday. And we've got a super lightweight bout between Jose Carlos Ramirez and Amir Imam. Interestingly enough, because that was a fight that was supposed to take place previously before Prograis and Indongo fought. So I think that this is going to be somewhat of what we call an eliminator, you know, in terms of the interim champion meets the person who, quote unquote, has the belt for real. You know, whatever. I don't care about the distinctions that all the sanctioning bodies like to make. Whoever wins this fight is probably going to have to fight Prograis, is the point. So that's a big fight that's coming up this weekend, and I believe it actually. It's going to be on ESPN actually. That fight's going to be on ESPN. So that'll be
and it's for the vacant WBC title.
Right. So it's for the right. So the thing is, Prograis is the interim WBC title holder. Okay, and now this fight is for the title, so to speak. Okay, so it's for the title. So those two are going to have to fight to decide who the title holder really is at this point. That's what's going to happen. So
and I think in that fight, we'll finally get a better chance to see just how well Prograis measures up at a higher level. Because like we said, I don't think Indongo was the right opponent for him. I think Postal would have been. But with Amir Imam, you got a guy who can punch. He's got power. So he's you know, if he beats Jose Ramirez, some people might say he's chinny, but if he beats Jose Ramirez, Regis hasn't fought a fighter with this type of power. And that's going to be a true test for him, and that's what I'm interested in seeing. I want to see how he looks. I want to see how he looks against a fighter that can bring back the punishment and has one-punch knockout power, because that's what Amir Imam has.
Yeah, he's been the number one contender for a little while, I think. I don't remember exactly when that happened, but he's been the number one contender for a little while. And if he wins, I think it's going to be him and Prograis as the next fight, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So that's kind of the next big fight coming up on the 17th. So that's one we'll be watching out for. The Boxing Freaks will be reviewing and looking forward to.